You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. And now, it's time for the show that breaks down the options market from unusual activity alerts to market analysis, strategy overviews, listener questions, and much more. If it involves puts and calls, then our all-star panel will break it down. It's time to hit the Option Block with your host, Mark Longo from the Options Insider Media Group, and co-hosts, Uncle Mike TOSAW from St. Charles Wealth Management, along with Mark the Greasy Meatball Sebastian and Andrew the Rock Lobster Giovinazzi from OptionPit.com. The Option Block is brought to you by tastytrade. You take the unbeaten path. You root for the away team. You wear shorts in winter. You don't put ketchup on a hot dog. So why wouldn't you trade with a broker that lets you go your own way? tastytrade. Stocks, options, futures, and more. You choose. You trade. Chart moves with hundreds of custom indicators. Stare at the candles till you see them in your sleep. See it, click it, trade it on mobile, web, or desktop. Supported by a trade desk that knows how traders think. The data, the tools, the knowledge. Get what you need to make smart moves. Go to tastytrade.com/pod to see for yourself, genius. tastytrade Incorporated is a registered broker-dealer and member of FINRA, NFA, and SIPC. And now, get ready to hit the Option Block.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back once again here on the network for a Monday morning. Now, a Monday afternoon. Yes, it is noon Central. It is 1 p.m. Eastern. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. Let's kick off a little bit of the old Option Block. My name, of course, Mark Longo from the THE OptionsInsider.com. And, of course, the network that you all know and love. Hopefully you all know and love. That said, a lot of new people discovering the content all the time. So if you're one of those new folks, you're just kind of making your way into it to the first time. First off, welcome. Secondly, leave a star rating and review so you can continue to help other new people discover the content. And if you want to discover more in your lives, and who can blame you, make sure you're A, listening to the full network wherever you get this show, and B, above and beyond, more great content coming at you over there, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. Options oddities, pro Q&As, 250-plus episodes coming at you straight through your ear holes the second you hit that button. Giveaways, all sorts of fun. theoptionsinsider.com/pro is the place to go. But you know what? It's not all the fun we have for you at the top of the show, listeners. It's our kickoff show for the week. So let's do it in high style, listeners. Are you ready? Are you willing? Because it is time to guess that 80s wrestler. Here we go. All right, everybody, welcome to our kickoff segment for the week. Kind of a fun one. By the way, of course, we are joined by the uncleist of Mikes, Mr. Uncle Mike TOSAW, whose neck of the woods I was in just yesterday, checking out the fancy environs of the hinterlands of Chicago. And then, of course, we are also joined by the greasiest of meatballs, who is still recovering from the post-RMC hangover. The entire Vol world coming to his neck of the woods for a couple of days out there. All right, but listeners, it's that time, 80s wrestling. And you know what? We have kind of exhausted your top tier of 80s wrestlers. We've done all your Warriors and your Hogans and your Andres and all those guys. We've even done a lot of mid-card guys. So we're going to mix it up a little bit today. This person wrestled in the 80s, but he's not known primarily as an 80s wrestler. That was probably mostly his developmental, his indie time. I think of this person in a very similar trajectory to what we saw from Undertaker. He wrestled in the 80s as well. He was mean Mark Callis, but nobody gave a crap. It wasn't until he came over to the WWF in, I think, 1990 that he became The Undertaker, and the career that became iconic was born. This person had a bit of a similar trajectory. Wrestled in the 80s, kind of an indie, kind of a no-name person. His career really didn't kick off until 1991, and it was in WCW, of all places, where he was signed first to his real name, but with a moniker in front of it. And so he went by the moniker of Stunning, and then his real name. Uncle Mike, already buzzing. Doesn't give me a chance to finish. All right, here we go. Mr. Uncle Mike, who came into WCW as Stunning So-and-so, and then later on in the mid to late 90s, really transformed the business as an iconic wrestler, sir.
Well, if you don't know, you should know. My name is Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Yeah, well done, sir. Yes,
and that's the bottom line, because I buzzed first.
Yes,
and that is not his real name, Mark. It's Steve. It's Steve something or other.
Yeah.
But did you know how they got him to be Stone Cold? Have you heard this story?
I have not. No, illuminate us.
Oh,
but I'll let the second place contender say it.
So what's that?
I'll let the second place contender say it.
All right. So they wanted to do this kind of, assassin. Like, it was originally supposed to be kind of like an assassin-y kind of thing, where he's like a killer. And they had all these terrible, terrible names. And Steve Austin hated all of them. And they said, well, you've got a couple of days to come up with a name, or we're picking one for you. And he was racking his brain. So he's having a conversation with his wife, who happens to be born in the UK. And she said to him, while he's worrying, she's like, Steve, I know, and because his first name, I believe, is Steve. She said, Steve, you're spending so much time worrying about this. Drink your tea before it becomes stone cold. And he said, what was that? She said, your tea. It's going to be stone cold. And that is
that really the origins of Stone Cold Steve Austin?
That is the origin of Stone Cold Steve Austin.
A British woman sipping tea at the tea time?
It had made him tea. And she said, Steve, drink your tea before it gets stone cold.
That couldn't be less stone cold if you tried as an origin story, but it's also pretty funny as a result. I did not know that.
Does that vibe with what you thought, Mike?
That was exactly. I didn't know it was she was a British woman, but I knew the story of the Stone Cold Tea.
Yes.
Mr. Meatball, for chiming in like that, because I want to make the game more competitive. Uncle Mike obviously gets the full point. I'll throw you half a point for a little bit of a nugget of the British origins of Stone Cold Tea. Who knew it, listeners? I certainly didn't know it. But again, I'm not a huge 90s wrestling guy. I, of course, know the iconic guys, Taker coming up in that time, and, of course, Stone Cold and others, Goldberg, etc. Some of whom are still floating around, which is crazy. But it's also time for us to float right on into the trading block.
It's time to break down the latest topics, trades, and trends in the world of options. It's time for the trading block.
You think Stone Cold, you think the Texas Rattlesnake, you think Chuggin' Bear and all the other stuff. You think all these uber manly crazy things and, breaking laws and all these things. And no, it was created by a British woman sipping tea. So intriguing stuff out there. Listen, did you know that? Did you guess Stone Cold Steve Austin? Did you guess? Are these markets stone cold today, listeners? I guess we'll find out. Earlier today, they were looking like they might be trending that way, at least briefly. We had a little bit of stone cold red on the screen, and then we actually did dip below the 4,200 level, 4,191 in the S&P. So I think calling it a dip is a misnomer out there. Now we're 50 handles plus north of that, listeners. We're at 2247, up about 23 points, or about 0.5% out there in the S&P right now. The Dow struggling with its identity today. It's only up about 0.1%, but it too has recovered from its worst losses of the day. And then we have the NASDAQ, as it is wont to do, leading the charge, up a full percent. Of course, a lot popping off today and this week. And we are, of course, in the throes of earnings season. So we'll get to all that fun in a little bit as well. So all this green on the screen means our vol friends, weirdly enough, They did get a lot frothier, a lot frostier during the week. Of course, if you want to hear the full saga, the full trajectory of all things vol from last week, listeners, and I encourage you, if you're not doing so already, check out Volatility Views. VIX obviously got a lot higher. In fact, it was at about a 22 earlier this morning again. You know, that's where we kicked off our journey this morning. Coming into the start of the show was at about a 1980, which put it literally unched from where we were on the Thursday show. Of course, if you rack that right now, it's down to about a 19.5, so it's down about a third. But still, VIX got pretty frothy. In fact, we were threatening the danger zone coming into the Friday show as well. Vol Views almost at a 22 there as well. So a little bit of logins underpinning the show on Friday. If you don't know what I'm talking about, listeners, check out Vol Views. That means VVIX, the vol of vol, still looking frothy. 107, up 3 points. Hit a high of almost 118 towards the end of last week. So vol got pretty volatile out there. Vol got pretty frothy. So, yeah, VVIX still north of 100. We were languishing well below it for quite some time this year. So seeing vol get that juicy again is very interesting and certainly worthy of note out there. VXX 24 3/4 up about half a point. UVXY 1790 up about 2/3 of a point. SVIX 24.5 obviously moving in the other direction, down about 3/4 of a point. And good old UVIX 3830 down 0.7 of a point, at least when we kicked off the show. Of course, if I rack it right now, it could be 3 handles away. The thing moves like a wild stallion. Yeah, it's 37.5 right now. I like that. But again, this thing could move in any direction at any moment. Talk about a wild beat. It's off 5.5 handles so far. Yeah, we got up as high today as 45.60. This thing is just bonkers. The post-split, post-40 UVIX, a very different beast. Let's go around the horn. Let's give it to our victor to go first. Mr. Uncle Mike, the Meatball already regaled us with a fun story about the origins of Stone Cold. If you have anything you want to share with the old Texas rattlesnake, have at it. Are you a fan of maybe the Ringmaster, one of his other early gimmicks? Another terrible one. And then B, what's catching your eye in the market today?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the Attitude Era, there were a few people that drew. I mean, it was with him and The Rock in the Attitude Era. I think what kind of a couple things that come to mind with Steve Austin. I think like, oh gosh, I didn't watch it. I really don't watch wrestling that much anymore, if at all. But I guess I had heard recently he made a guest appearance on a WWE show, and as soon as he started talking, the audience, even though he hasn't been active for like 20 years consistently, the audience is still going, what? And he's been out for 20 years. I mean, I think that just shows the impact that he had on the sport. And the one thing that I remember is when him and Mike Tyson were going at it, and he flipped off Mike Tyson in the ring. And granted, there was a lot of people there and that type of thing, but with Mike Tyson coming at you, that had to scare him just a little bit, I would think, even though he knew Mike Tyson wasn't going to do anything to him. Just with Mike chasing him around the ring or doing what they did at that time, I'm just sitting there thinking, I don't know if that had to be kind of a tense moment, even though it's still, no matter what, it's still Mike Tyson.
He's not known for pulling his punches, Tyson, especially in that time.
No. And so that's just the other story that I had about Steve Austin when he said, yeah, you're a tough boxer and all, but this is wrestling. This is way harder than boxing. In case you don't know it, this is why I'm thinking. I got some sign language for you. And they flipped him off. So you don't see TV like that anymore. But anyway, in terms of the markets today, yeah, it looked like it was doom and gloom early on with both stocks and bonds, more coming. But the buyers came in. And so that's kind of the story so far today. And it'll be interesting to see if we can maintain this throughout the day today. But I think that the big mover with earnings coming up right now is Microsoft. It's up. I guess it's not really a big mover, but it is up over $5 on the day. So we do have that happening with earnings this week. That'll be interesting to see for sure. Throughout the market itself, we do have a somewhat of a rally in technology, a little under 1%. We have consumer discretionaries rallying. With energy, that's actually down on the day, so it's kind of the what's dragging the market a little bit and not letting it go to its full potential, so to speak. A couple names that just pop out, of course, NVIDIA is up $15 on the day today. That's definitely a mover. But aside from that, we're not getting like any major pops. But I do have an optimistic feeling going into a lot of these earnings announcements coming up. But it's me. What do I know about optimism and realism, right? The other thing that I will talk more about on the strategy block is a way with which I am playing the bonds right now. It's kind of a safer way, in my opinion, to get some exposure in case we get a pop, but still get some safer income in the meantime. And I'll talk more about that on the strategy block today. So there's your hook.
A little bit of a teaser from the Uncle List of mics as we now go to Mr. Meatball, busy popping Tums and aspirin to recover from the nonstop 3-day party that is RMC. Mr. Meatball, we talked about it with you on Friday. Any other things that have popped to mind for you in terms of RMC that you forgot to mention? You thought, that actually was pretty cool. I should have brought that up. B, if you have any, I'm not sure if you have any other stories about Stone Cold because you gave us a good one. And then C, what's catching your eye out there in the market, sir?
A little recap that you can check out on Twitter. Friday morning, as I mentioned, the big thing that the guy mentioned was that the equity markets are pretty well hedged, but credit markets are way under hedged right now. They also, David Dredge gave probably the best presentation. You should go check him out. And kind of pointed out, did you know this? They have CPI data in the Bank of England going back to about 1250. So I
was looking for some 13th century CPI data from England.
Well, but the data is fascinating. Most of us, we've got this recency bias. We don't realize that the 20-year period we're just coming out of is the outlier, not the norm. And so CPI is usually higher and much more volatile than it has been the last 20 years. And so what to a lot of people seems like not normal and an outlier is actually the new normal and is kind of the way it generally supposed to be, which I thought was really interesting. I don't know if we talked about that. And then of course, and the big thing everyone was talking about was dispersion. And SEBO's got this new dispersion index coming out, and they intend to make it tradable. I know we talked about that on Vol Views. But I'm kind of excited to kind of see how that one develops.
What you're telling me, too, is that SEBO's obviously going to launch a vol of inflation product soon. That's what it sounds like. CPI volatility. Well, in addition to that, sir, what's catching your eye out there in the market today, sir?
Well, we broke below the 200. We broke below 4,200 this morning on the S&Ps, and they bought it. Nice little bounce back. We're now kind of sitting on the 200-day moving average. This feels like a little bit of a one-day reprieve. Really, I think we'll start getting some more information, tomorrow and as the week progresses, because we've got Google and Microsoft after the bell tomorrow, then Meta, and we have Apple next week and Amazon later in the week as well. So this next week for earnings is going to be very, very interesting.
It's a hot one, listener, so let's get into it. Let's start with what we're seeing out there today. And, when we dip below 4,200 and have a reversal, usually that's a good sign for volume at least, and that is the case right now. All of the major indexes putting up some numbers right now. VIX, like we said, the ADV is already impressive. 946,000 contracts on the tape, so we're threatening 1 million contracts a day in the VIX, and it's already almost there. 800,000 contracts already on the tape. You don't see that too often, listeners. VIX north of 800K by this portion of the show. So that's a bit of a banger day. Probably going to hit 1 million today unless things really shrivel up at the end of the day and dry up. But impressive numbers out there in VIX. And I look forward to parsing it more on Vol Views later this week and see what was going up out there for size. SPY, same deal, 6.4 million contracts. Usually we're at 4, maybe 4.5 on a really robust day. Almost 6.5 right now. Yeah, we're putting up some numbers today. The ADV, 9.5 million contracts. I mean, that's some paper out there. The S saying, don't forget about me, 2.01 million contracts on the tape right now in the S. The ADV, 3.5 million. Man, that is bonkers paper. I know I keep beating this dead horse, and if you're new to this business, you might be saying, wow, why does he keep hitting on this? Yeah, the S does 3 million. Big whoop. So what? It's what you're used to. That's your frame of reference now. But go back a little bit, listeners, and you'll see what the real numbers S normally puts up. And you'll see 3.5 million as the average. bonkers. That's a technical term, bonkers. Small caps, 739,000. Let's see, where is our friend IWM hanging out right now, listeners? And the answer is up slightly on the day, up about 0.1%. It was selling off, obviously, earlier this morning as well. So it's pretty much a turnaround across the board. IWM, 739,000 contracts on the tape. So already almost halfway to its 1.54 million, 1.5 million contracts. We were talking about how 1 million seemed like a lot of paper for small caps. 1.54 million right now. So these are deep waters we're all swimming through right now in terms of volume, listeners. This is serious business. And the Qs already at 3 million. It used to be averaging 3.2, 3.3 in a day. Got 3 million up already, listeners. And the ADV right now almost 4.25 million. So wherever you look on the large cap or the small cap or the vol side, wherever you're looking out there, there is paper to be found. Let's go out to the single names now. Let's see if the same can be said out there. And in the past, when we've had these kind of banger whipsaw days, the answer was normally no. Everyone's so obsessed with slinging 0 DTE, SPX, or buying VIX, or whatever the heck they're doing, they're not really paying attention to Palantirs and the Microsofts of the world. Let's see if that's the case today. And the answer is, yeah, it's still the case. It only cost you 174,000 contracts to break into the top 10 today, which is not much. That's kind of an average day. It's a lower than average day, actually. And that gets us to Microsoft, number 10, up $5.50 today. Oh, they just ticked up $4.90 now. 331 and about a half, listeners. And again, good for 174,000. They've had a range today of 324.39 and a high of 332.72. Quite the banger range out there. And yet, only good for 174,000. I guess nobody wants single names anymore, listeners. They're just not cool. Number 9, keeping it in the M tech names. Let's go out to Meta, a.k.a. the artist formerly known as Facebook. 176,000 contracts. Meta up 6, almost 7 handles right now, about 2.25%. They've had almost an exactly $10 range, 10.10 actually. 307.26 to the dark side, 317.36 to the upside. Quite a banger day for Meta. And again, only good for number 9. Number 8, still keeping it in M tech names, but with a crypto flavor this time. Let's go to number 8. It's Mara, a.k.a. Marathon Digital Holdings. Number 8, 199,000 contracts. 868, popping 91 cents, or nearly 12% today. My goodness, banger day for them. Marathon got as low as, looks like about 768 during the sell-off last week, and up to about 867 right now, so up about exactly $1 from the lows last Thursday. Of course, on the year, it got lower. It got down to 311. But intriguing stuff. Good for the number 8 spot. Number 7, listeners. They loved it for a while. It did seem like all this horrible stuff unfolding in the Middle East was a driver to the upside for this stock. Then they came for it last week. Talking about Palantir, they crushed it back down to about $15.50. In fact, that's what it hit this morning before turning around and rallying. It's still off about $0.75 over the past week, even if it's up about a dime today. So Palantir, number 7, 206,000 contract. This name all over the place over the past month. Number 6, to the A tech names we go, listeners. First off, it's AMD holding down the bottom half of the chip zone. 240,000 contracts at number 6. That's a pretty light day. 101.94 is where it's hanging out right now, up about a dime. On the day, it's rallied $3.10. And the number 6 spot, number 5, you know it's earnings season, listeners. Bank of America, 276,000 contracts, 25.88. So this one continuing to sell off today. Again, good for number 5. Number 4, we're going back to the A tech names. It's the Amazonians out there. Number 4, nothing paper on the tape today for this. Amazon up 218, trading 127.33. They've had a low of 123.98 and a high of 127.88. So a nice pop, almost exactly $4 to the upside, and yet a lot of paper. Let's keep it in the A tech names, listeners. Why don't we, listeners? It's number 3. It's the fruit company. 173 and about a quarter right now, up about 40-odd cents. Good for 492,000 contracts. Again, that's kind of a rounding error for Apple. Apple got as low as 169.93 on the dark side. Let's see. Is that the lowest Apple's been in a while? Looks like at least in about a month it has. Got down to 170.5 at the end of September. Yeah, breaking the 170 level this morning. Seems like that was the low. Then it bounced off that, got up to pretty much almost where it is right now, 173.64 higher. And hanging out right now, good for 492,000 contracts. Number 2, it seems like we have kind of settled into this order now, listeners. Apple getting kicked down to number 3, and then this name taking the number 2 spot, which is NVIDIA, the tip of the AI spear, the other half of the chip zone, call it what you will. Only 686,000 contracts on the tape for NVIDIA, even though that's not as terrible. Up 14 handles even right now, trading 427.91. Low 409 and about a half, the high 429.99. So yet another banger day out here in NVIDIA, good for 686,000 contracts. And you know what number 1 is, listeners. They had a rough week last week. Analysts calling Musk, a petulant child on that earnings call, something along those lines. Having to slash prices yet again, all the other stuff going on out there. So it's a day that ends in Y. There's some drama in the number 1 name. It's Tesla. 1.71 million. They're putting up some numbers today, listeners. It's like Tesla is the only one that really knows that it's a banger day out there. The rest of these seem kind of sleepy. 213.38, up $1.38 right now. The range today, though, 202 and about a half to the dark side, and 217 pretty much on the upside. Oh, my goodness. Just a crazy week out there, crazy day, 1.71 million. Speaking of crazy weeks, we are in it. If you live for a little bit of earnings season trading, listeners, then allow me to present to you this week. I think banger doesn't even begin. Cut it. Last week, of course, we had Tesla and some other names you've actually heard of. This week, got more of them on the horizon. You got Philips today. Tomorrow, you got Coca-Cola, and you got Verizon, the Meatball, and the Rock Lobster's favorites. All those 34 halves. Quality goodness. GE, GM, and good old Softy. Now, how's Softy going to look with most of this legal rigmarole behind it, at least as it applies to the Activision deal? We shall see. Alphabet also tomorrow, and Snap and Visa. Wednesday, Boeing, our friends across the street, I guess for a little while longer. They're still there, at least in name. I'm not sure if they've moved out yet. T-Mobile, Hilton, Meta, our artist formerly known as Facebook, and good old Beamer. Thursday, Chipotle, Southwest Airlines, Amazon, Intel, Ford, Capital One, and even Skechers for a little bit of sneaker ball. And then Friday, you got Exxon, you got Chevron, and you got Philips. A banger week. Not much popping off this morning unless you're really excited about Bank of Hawaii. So we'll skip that one, listeners, and keep on rolling to some of the upcoming earnings that are popping off this weekend. Man, we've got metric ton. Let's see how many we could squeeze in here. Let's go out to, they are the 24th before the bell. 106.08 is where they were trading. They were pricing in $6.10, listeners. My goodness, in the past they've moved $3.68. So yeah, they are expecting a banger number in one direction here. One direction or the other for GE. If GE doesn't do it for you, how about GM? They're on the 24th, also before the bell. So pick your G acronym name, and you got your choice there on the 24th. 29.66 is where they were trading. They were pricing in $1.58. In the past, it moved to $1.36. So more juice, but not quite as just explosive. Let's go out to Buffett's. Is it former favorite? Is he still in on Coke? I don't know. I don't follow Buffett. 54.5 is where Coke was when we ran this number. 24th before the bell. Pricing in $1.32. In the past, they moved 64 cents. So pretty much a 2Xer out here for Coke. So man, they're pricing in some Coca-Cola juice. Pun intended. Let's go out to Verizon. We talked about this a lot on Options Oddities recently. Also 24th before the bell. $31.50 is where they were trading. They're pricing in $1.21. In the past, they moved 73 cents. So that's a heck of a lot of extra juice out there as well. For Verizon, where was that juice last cycle? Could have used it. Let's go out to the GOOGs and the GOOGLs. Also 24th, but after the bell. They were trading right around between 135.60 and 136.75 each. They were both pricing in about $6.99, and they both moved in the past right around $6.50. So more juice, but not an explosive amount. Softy, 24th after the bell as well, 326.67. They were pricing in $14.60. In the past, they've moved about $12.50. So about $2.07 worth of extra juice out there in Softy. Now that the legal rigmarole is behind them, at least when it comes to the Activision deal, is that merited? Is there more on the horizon? What are your thoughts, listeners? Let's go to our friends across the street. Boeing, 25th before the bell. 180 pretty much even is where they were trading. They were pricing in $9.20. In the past, they've moved $7.18, so over $2 of extra juice out here. So, wow. The order of the day for this cycle, listeners, does appear to be a heck of a lot more juice. Let's keep scrolling really quickly, see if we can find some others that break that trend a little bit. How about Beamer? 25th after the bell, 137.16. They were pricing in $5.84. In the past, they moved $6.93. So Beamer cutting off about $1.10 off the top there. So not everybody pricing in more juice. Here we go. Meta, 10.25 after the bell. They were at 308.65 when we ran this report. They were pricing in $26 pretty much even. In the past, they've moved nearly $36, $35.89. So they're cutting nearly $10 off the top. So it's not all extra juice. It's just a heck of a lot of it. You can find some more that are bucking the trend, listeners. Let's go out to, Southwest Airlines. They're not doing it. 24.20. They're on the 26th after the bell. They're pricing in about $1.50. In the past, they moved about 84 cents. So a fair amount extra juice. Not quite 2x, but pretty darn close. So Southwest pricing in more juice. Go figure. A little bit more energy vol out there right now. Go out to the Amazonians. 26th after the bell. Man, we have so many. We've got to get rolling, listeners. 125.17. They were pricing in 8.25. In the past, they moved 8.63. So a little bit off the top, but not much. Kind of mostly in line. Let's go out to Chipotle, 26 after the bell as well. I love the stock price on this. 18.31.25. They're pricing in 126 and about a half. In the past, they moved about 129. So a little bit off the top, but not much out there for the former stealth Apple. Not so stealthy anymore at nearly a $2,000 stock price. Let's do Ford and Intel, then we'll roll on out of here. Let's go to Ford. 26 after the bell, 11.64. They're pricing in about nearly 60 cents. In the past, they've moved 45. So extra juice for Ford. All this strike action going on in their neck of the woods probably explains some of that. And then Intel, 26 after the bell. About $35 is where they were trading. They're pricing in $2.36. In the past, they moved $2.69. So less juice for Intel. And that, listeners, I could keep going with the rest of the show. We have dozens upon dozens of tickers here that we've crunched for you. Luckily for you, you can go check them out for yourselves. TheOptionsInsider.com. Click on the Options News and Articles tab. It's all waiting there for you, all completely for free, because we love you. I would argue this is some of the best earnings data on the planet. Certainly free earnings data. I don't know anyone who gives you better free earnings data than this. If you want better, I guess you got to go commission a report at a brokerage house, and it's going to cost you. Certainly we don't charge you a damn thing. You can't beat this. In terms of the season, 114% right now with 66 names reporting. That will undoubtedly settle down, but we shall see out there. The long-term average right now hanging out at exactly 100%, which is kind of weird. Speaking of weird, let's get to it, listeners. A little bit of the old odd block.
It's time to break down the most interesting, unusual, and downright questionable options activity that's been identified by TheOptionsInsider.com. It's time for the Odd Block.
All right, everybody, time to get weird, time to get wild. And Mr. Meatball, before I dive into some of the paper we found today, I've been talking for a bit, so I'm going to give my voice a rest. I know you folks are looking at a lot of interesting flow over there in the land of the pit. Any intriguing trades you want to break down or talk about with our listeners, sir?
Yeah, this is one that we thought was kind of interesting and did some things around it. NNDM. I don't know if you saw this.
Yes, it is our first trade of the day, sir, but give us your thoughts.
Oh, then, all right. I've got one. Here's one more. Jets? Did you do Jets?
We did not, sir, so have at it.
All right. I've got an LVS trade we can look at.
I haven't talked about Jets in a while. Let's do Jets.
All right. So this is kind of my favorite kind of trader. We got a trader sold to close 43,000 of the Jets D16 puts. This is probably their second or third roll. And then they bought to open the D15 puts in Jets. So this is a trader that's been pretty consistently right, selling at a nice profit at the D16s and then rolling into the 15s. These are the type of traders that guys like Mark and I like to keep track of because they tend to be guys that have a pretty decent guys or girls that have a decent track record of being right are the type of people that you typically want to trade with.
Yeah, those are the ones that are worth paying attention to because, they have a decent little track record. Yeah, Jets was a fun one, especially it really came on my radar during the pandemic. That's when everyone seemed to discover this name. Of course, we had a lot of vol in names like American and everything else, so go figure. an ETF like Jets would be a banger out there. I haven't talked about it in a while, though, so this is interesting to have some put paper and some correct put paper. So it sounds like they're keeping the downside party alive for a little bit longer, Mr. Meatball. They're not disclosing
that. Is correct. They are betting that, there could be some continued pain in JETS, Jets. It's going to be like an Aaron Rodgers knee.
That could explain why they're pricing in nearly 2x for the straddle in Southwest right now, too. Looking at some more juice. And again, a lot of volatility on the earnings front, or excuse me, on the energy front right now, listeners. So that always eats into the airlines. So, intriguing stuff. You like that? You like some downside puts in Jets, listeners? Have you been playing in Jets in the last year or so? It's kind of been a sleepier name for a little bit, but it was a banger for a while. Maybe it's time to be a banger again. Sounds like our friend has been making money in it. So a good one for he or she out there as we keep on rolling into what our Eye of Sauron found today. Let's go out to Nano Dimension Limited, listeners. This is an ADR. Let's see. They have subsidiaries including Global Inkjet Systems. So they own printers? Oh, it's a 3D printing company. Okay. Trading $2.84 right now, up about a nickel today. Let's see. On the year, a year ago was trading about $2.50. So they're up on the year about 34 cents. So not a bad little pop. About 13, almost 14%. They came for it pretty soon last year. They crushed it down to about $2 almost exactly. That was on December 9th. Then they rallied it again in March, got up to $3.11. So it's a very volatile 3D printing name. And then right back down to like about $2.20. That was in June. And then right back up again to the high for the year of $3.35 in July. And then ever since then, with the exception of a little pop in August, it's been mostly drifting right back down again. It got down to about $2.50 just last week, and now they've rallied it another about 30, almost 35 cents. So very volatile 3D printing name out here. What did our Eye of Sauron find this morning, listeners? Somebody's going near term. They're going out to the weeklies. In particular, was the ACH 2.5 calls expiring this Friday, the 27th. We first noticed a block of about 4,450 going up. Paper lifting the offer on those for 30 cents. That is about 150 vol, as meaningful as such numbers are in the weeklies, listeners. Then we saw some more filtering in. 9 minutes later, we saw 1,337 going up for 35 cents. About the same time as the first block, we saw another 1,200 going up for 30 cents. So quite a few have gone up out here on the day, listeners, in good old NNDM. Right now, we have a total of about 8,300 of these have traded today. So looks like somebody swinging for a little bit of the near-term upside fences in an in-the-money weekly call. You like that structure, listeners? You like not our typical 5, 10, 20% out of the money weekly call. No, they're going straight in the money this time, which is interesting. Mr. Meatball, you don't see that too often, in the money weekly calls. What are your thoughts on those in everyone's favorite volatile 3D printer, NNDM?
Yeah, this thing has kind of volume across the board. They're buying the 3 calls 2 for Friday, and among other things. And, there's about 2,700 of the 3 calls for Friday, 1,300 of the 3 calls for November, some for the regular, a bunch for the regular November as well. So they are, they're not messing around here.
They are not, and very near-dated paper for a lot of it as well. So, yeah, listeners.
Absolutely, which is interesting, right?
Yeah, so far, they're looking, the stock was 271 when they started buying this stuff, so they got a little bit of a pop in the stock. So they're passing that first test, but, yeah, they need this thing to keep banging to the upside by Friday. We'll come back maybe on the Thursday show with the Flowmaster listeners to see how these are faring. As we go out to our final name, I've talked about this one in a long time. This is BLMN Brands, Inc., ticker symbol BLMN. You know them, listeners. They own Outback Steakhouse, hence the name, the Bloomin' Onion. I was out in the suburbs this past week, and not just for the Uncle Mike's realm, but also in the far suburbs for some football-related activities. And there were no Outbacks out there, but we needed something to eat after the game. So we went actually to a Texas Roadhouse. Haven't been to one of those in forever. And they have the exact same stuff. They have the Bloomin' Onion. They call it something else. It's pretty much the exact same thing. I felt like I was getting the Outback experience. 23.41 is where BLMN Brands is trading right now, off about a dime today. On the year, let's see, a year ago, 21 and about a quarter is where it was trading. So it's up about 220 or so on the year, a little over 10%. Not a bad year for them. They got to their low in December, end of December, about 1996. So they just broke the 20 handle. And then they rallied it in February to its high for the year of about 28.67. And then since then, it's been bouncing around. It got to its low again in May of 22.67, then up again in July to about $28.50, and it revisited that high again in August to about 28, almost and a half again. And then now it's come in about $5 to about 23. They're off about 2 months here for the old bloomin' onion. What did our Eye of Sauron find? Let's see. Listen, are they fading it? They think the love is going to come back. Let's see. We saw a bunch of the Nove 25s going up this morning, listeners. Looks like, let's see, yeah, all these went up at around the same time, going up for prices. It's like they were offered at 45 cents. They got their first 3,001 for 47.8 cents. Then they bought 1,721 for 50 cents, and they got the balance, I guess, like about 503 at 55 cents. So they bought these all the way up to 55 cents from 45. So somebody clearly had to have a little bit of the Nove 25s in Bloomin', which is a now out of the money call, listeners. So intriguing. I don't know, Mr. Meatball, you're sometimes skeptical of the fast casual chains, even though I know you love yourself a little bit of the old Olive Garden. So I guess you'd like these more if these were Olive Garden calls. But what do you think about some Bloomin' Onion calls, sir?
I mean, Outback Steakhouse, not bad. Everyone loves a Bloomin' Onion. Earnings are coming up on the 3rd. This may be a play on that. There's not a ton of open interest. This pretty much matches the total open interest in this stock. Maybe a little bit less, but this is a pretty big play for Bloomin' Brands, is what I will tell you.
Yeah, keep an eye on the old Bloomin' Onion, listeners. As we keep rolling, it is time to keep an eye on Uncle Mike, a little bit of the old strategy block.
It's time to dispense options, wit, wisdom, and education. It's time for the Strategy Block.
All right, listeners, time for Uncle Mike to spend the next 11 or so minutes regaling us with his stories of the Ringmaster and stunning Steve Austin and then Stone Cold.
Yeah, I don't have many of those, and I don't even think Steve Austin himself has a lot of those, to tell you the truth. But I will have a story about this bond market lately, and it's just craziness. So on Friday, I ended up exercising my long puts, and I got out of my bond ETF for a lot of my clients. And so with that today, the bonds were kind enough to be fairly calm over the weekend and a slight pullback in the morning, thankfully. But what I wanted to do right now is I think we're very volatile. But I think, and I do feel the bond market is going to come back in some way, shape, or form. But holding the bonds itself, I think there's a spot in the portfolio for that. But I think that what I am doing right now is a means of protection in case the bond market does continue to go lower and we continue to raise interest rates, is I'm actually buying calls in a little bit more of an aggressive bond than what I was doing before. Now, compliance purposes dictate I can't really tell you these exact things, so that's kind of the reason I'm talking a little bit vague right now. But what I did was I bought slightly out of the money calls in another bond, and as of now, I'm all in cash with the exception of this small amount of money that's in these out of the money calls in a slightly more aggressive bond fund. And so the reason with which I'm doing that is because of the fact that I am still bullish on bonds. I think the second that the Fed says, okay, I think we've had enough raises, I think we're going to go up, and we're going to go up very quickly. However, when they say that, that's very unknown. So now what am I doing with the rest of the money? Well, at this point, what I'm doing, I haven't done it as of yet because institutional trading takes me a little bit longer than just putting in a 5 lot in my personal account or whatever. What I'm in the process of doing, and I should have it done by tomorrow, is I plan on having the rest of the money into a very short-term government treasury to where there's minimal, if any, risk, and quite honestly, the equivalent of a money market. And so by doing that, let's say that bonds do continue to tank and that the bond market is just awful and we're at a 7% yield on the 10-year in the next 2 months. I doubt that's going to happen that quickly, but let's just say in theory we did. There's no risk to what I'm doing if that were to happen, or very minimal risk of that hurting me. However, let's say we do start to come back in bonds. Well, the ultra short-term money market fund that I'm in, it's really not going to be hurt too badly. It'll just have lesser money market payments. But the calls that I have in this more aggressive bond fund will benefit me. So that sounds great, Mike. You're telling me how you're going to get all the upside, none of the downside. Yeah, right. Well, no matter what, there is always a downturn to some of the trade. And so what I'm giving up right now is there's probably a few percentage points in the bond itself if it is to rush higher. And I'm fine giving up those percentage points for the protection and the upside with which I'm getting by doing what I'm doing. No matter what, you can never have all your cake and eat it too. You're going to give up something no matter what type of trade you do and what way you structure it. But I feel right now the way with which to structure bonds with larger amounts of money is to go short-term yields, very short-term yields, along with buying some calls and some longer-term paper because of the fact that if we do start gaining money in the bond market, then I think it's going to go up and the paper will go up pretty quickly, quite honestly. If we don't and we go down, well, short term is paying a pretty good interest right now. And definitely way more than enough to pay for the slightly out of the money calls that I've bought on the longer term paper. And so that is how I am playing the bond market at this point in time. And I don't know what Stone Cold would say about it, but I want to be protected and I want upside. And that's the bottom line.
That's the bottom line, because Uncle Mike told you. Right on into a little bit of the old mail block.
It's time to tell you what we'll be watching on our trading screens until the next episode. It's time for Around the Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the mail block. Took a bit of a hiatus from the question of the week last week, but we're back at it this week. Revisiting a hot topic. Everyone, RMC, Flowmaster's been on here, data coming out of SIBO. We had Wall Street Journal. Everyone's just up in arms about all things zero DTE right now. So we thought it was a good time to revisit a question we asked you about 6 months ago. And that question is a very simple one. But, we have more data under our belts now to make a more informed conclusion. And so we thought, hey, we'll put it out to you again. Time to revisit this question. Quite simply, do zero DTE options increase intraday volatility? Heck yes, heck no, or you're still on the fence. You still need more data. Boo to you out there right now. People are already weighing in on this. This just went live a few minutes ago. Our pro member, Age Delaquarius, he's well known for not exactly being a fan of zero DTE. He responded, said, does gasoline cause a fire to spread? So his views are well known on this matter. Mr. Meatball, I think your views are well known as well. What are your thoughts out there in terms of, now that we have a little bit more data under our belts, your position on whether zero day increases or decreases intraday volatility? And then B, what do you think our audience is voting for?
Well, having said that was a major topic at RMC. They did a whole panel on it. And the conclusion of the panel, and really the guys that I were sitting at the table, the cool guy table I was at, was that until it doesn't, it does. Does that make sense? It is reducing volatility in the SPX when it doesn't. And there are some, very specific reasons that would happen. The move will be wild. But until then, you're going to see some, and maybe this dispersion index, these dispersion futures will help relieve some of that pressure. But right now, the answer is pretty much unequivocally it does. And that until it doesn't, and when it does not, that is when things are going to get very fun.
Only thing I could take issue with there is that you said you were at the cool guy table. Clearly, you forgot I wasn't at the conference, so there could be no cool.
Well, no, I mean the cool guy table for people at the conference. Obviously, okay. You're not there.
A lower bar. So, I see. You said a lower threshold. You could meet that lower bar. I understand. So intriguing stuff. He's never been called the cool guy, but he has always been the fun, optimistic guy, and he knows a thing or two about wrestling. Mr. Uncle Mike, sir, what are your thoughts on 0 days? Are they increasing intraday volatility or not? And B, what do you think our audience is voting for?
Yeah, I would think that they are decreasing volatility, and I haven't studied them that much. I mean, I'm not much of an intraday kind of guy, but instead of going long and short the futures contract, you can go long a call or a put. And so by being able to do that, I think that for the most part, I think it is going to keep it less volatile in terms of it does until it doesn't. Or it doesn't until it does. I forget which way Mark went with that. But I mean, I think we're going to stay less volatile. And I think it's going to be a while until we actually get something like that for where we're trying to do. Because I believe right now, just my gut instincts tell me that why would you go long or short a futures contract for just a little bit of juice? You can buy a call or a put. So I think it's making it less volatile.
Does give us more options, pun intended, as we discussed with the Flowmaster on the show last week. Right now, listeners, you folks are lining up pretty much the way you lined up in February, the last time we asked this question. And around that time, around 61% of you ended up saying, yes, they do increase intraday volatility. Right now, it's exactly 2/3, 66.7% saying heck yes, and about 1/3 saying heck no. Thankfully, no one choosing the coward's way out. I still need more data. But this just went live right before showtime, listeners. Get over there, add options. It is our new question of the week.
It's time to tell you what we'll be watching on our trading screens until the next episode. It's time for Around the Block.
All right, listeners, let's go around the horn and see what everyone's keeping an eye on until the Thursday episode. Mr. Uncle Mike, we will start with you, sir. What is on your radar until the big Thursday show?
Just seeing if where we are in the bond world, and then just with the plethora of earnings with which we have, definitely going to be watching those with bated breath. And we got something going on in Israel right now, so checking that out as well.
Plethora, it's a big week for earnings. Uncle Mike dropping the 5, maybe like a $10 word. Uncle Mike throwing the big vocab words around. I like it. As we keep on rolling out to the former Southern Volatility Mecca. RMC is gone. Is it still the Southern Vol Mecca? I'll leave that up to you, listeners. Mr. Meatball, sir, you're still in the post-RMC hangover. What are you keeping an eye on until the Thursday episode?
Yeah, I mean, we got a bunch of earnings, and I'm want to see kind of what happens with rates. The 10-year Treasury hit 5% and pulled back. Is it able to hold those? Is it able to hold below this 5% yield level? At which point, the markets can rally. Markets can rally if bonds just stop going up. But if bonds turn right back around, things could get ugly again. And then I'm watching this VIX curve flutter between backward and flat and contango, and going to be keeping an eye on that. Another $5 day in UVIX, which you and I love. So lots and lots to watch, along with all these big corporate earnings.
UVIX, the beast that keeps on giving. what a monster that thing is. We could do a whole show about it. Luckily, we have one, listener. It's called Volatility Views. So check it out on the network if you're not. You can listen every Friday live, of course, and it's available on demand later on Friday. Unfortunately, that music means we are done, at least for the old OB listeners. But don't worry, if you need more in your lives, we got you covered. I'll be back in a little bit with the Crypto Rundown. I'll be joined by our guest in the Crypto Hot Seat this week. He is David Wells, the CEO of Enclave Markets, what they are calling the world's first fully encrypted exchange. So intriguing stuff. We'll get into what the heck is that in a little bit on the Crypto Rundown, as well as, of course, all the action in the world of crypto derivatives. Before we do that, let's go back around the horn. Mr. Uncle Mike, where should folks go if they want more Uncle Mike goodness in their lives?
Follow me on Twitter at Mike TOSAW, TOSAW, or check out my website, stcharleswealth.com, if you're looking for a financial advisor who will talk about bonds and have solutions for them when they are in a position like they are.
And, of course, if you want to go check out a Costco that is adjacent to a fairground and across the street from a delicious gyro, then head on up to St. Charles. Fun stuff to be had over there. A lot of good barbecue out there in Austin, maybe a good vol conference or two. Mr. Meatball, where should they go if they want more option pit goodness?
OptionPit.com. Check us out.
OptionPit.com, the place to go. Remember, if you're listening live, hang out. You don't have to go anywhere, listeners. We'll be back in a little bit with the Crypto Rundown live in your ear holes. For the rest of you, that'll be hitting the network later on today, so make sure you're subscribed to the full network, of course. And then back again throughout the rest of the week with our usual assortment, including a pro Q&A with the one, the only Uncle Mike TOSAW coming at you tomorrow. So if you want your chance to get at him from all sides, maybe you think Stone Cold sucks, maybe you don't like his impression, maybe you want to question his bull devotion to this market or anything else, only one place to go, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. I got a feeling that'll be a fun one. Folks usually like getting at Uncle Mike on the old pro Q&A hot seat. So that'll be coming up tomorrow. And then, of course, Wednesday we got, of course, Options Boot Camp. And then Thursday, another episode of the Option Block. Stay safe out there.
The Option Block is brought to you by tastytrade. You take the unbeaten path. You root for the away team. You wear shorts in winter. You don't put ketchup on a hot dog. So why wouldn't you trade with a broker that lets you go your own way? tastytrade. Stocks, options, futures, and more. You choose. You trade. Chart moves with hundreds of custom indicators. Stare at the candles till you see them in your sleep. See it, click it, trade it on mobile, web, or desktop. Supported by a trade desk that knows how traders think. The data, the tools, the knowledge. Get what you need to make smart moves. Go to tastytrade.com/pod to see for yourself, genius. tastytrade Incorporated is a registered broker-dealer and member of FINRA, NFA, and SIPC. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.